It's actually very funny because I think people would find me more annoying if I didn't have female co-hosts. Like we're social animals, so when somebody does something, we kind of do that as well. And so like when you or Katie laugh at it, it's immediately like, okay, I'm not supposed to take this seriously.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was just me, it would be kind of weird and creepy.
There's so many things you say that if it was not tempered by Katie and I, oh man. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It is me, your host, Maria, with my ruggedly handsome co-host, William. Ooh,
And
so
I am in a
rugged.
new location than I normally am. You can see because it's actually well organized instead of my background. My nephew's in town, so I'm at my aunt's house actually right now. So
His
same
nephew
analysis, different background.
his nephew was gonna make a sneak appearance, but it
I
didn't
think,
happen.
yeah, he is off somewhere else.
You will have to be satisfied with Data looking like a puddle. Data, come here. Nope. Oh, and look, surprise guest appearance from Pumpkin. That's it.
And that's actually a good transition because we're going to be talking about a book with a lot of animals in it. And what is that book, Maria?
The Scorpio Races by, I have completely forgotten.
Maggie Stiefvater.
Look at us. We knew an author. So Will knew an author.
Because her name is very weird in Norwegian. So like I was trying to actually get the name correct. And this book was one that had been suggested on our Patreon poll for the end of the book month. And it didn't win, but I'd actually been wanting to read it for a while because I started reading it like 3 or 4 years ago and I got about a fourth of the way through and it was so good, but I just didn't finish it. So I'd had it on our list for a while and I'm glad we got there.
Me too. I am also really glad that I finished it a couple of days ago. I enjoyed it so much at the end that I think if I would have finished it right before the recording, I would have been vastly less critical than I am right now because I've been able to like now that the high has like come down because like listen, I enjoyed the crap out of this book. It's the first book in a long time that has made me want to read fan fiction. But there are some things that I think could have been done better that had you spoken to me 2 days ago, I would have been like, no, it's perfect. Little angel baby.
This may be an interesting contrast then, because I really, Maria may be the more critical of the two of us going into this. And that'd be an interesting role reversal.
I won't be. I'm going to say something and Will is going to go, you're absolutely correct. That is a very valid critique. And I'll go, I know, thank you.
That always happens. If you watch like the Dune or the Warhammer video, I'm like, yeah, that's a fair point. I'm unable to be uncritical.
I can't argue.
Okay, yeah, no, so overall I really love this book. Again, I really want to read other stuff by the author now. She has a couple of other books. I went in thinking this was going to be a little bit more emotionally overwrought than it was, and instead it was actually really grounded and really well put together. Do you want to say what the synopsis before we give our overall impressions?
So this book is set on a tiny little island called Thisbe, and Thisbe has water horses, the Capel Ishka, which are these like aquatic horses who eat meat and
carnivorous.
And they're carnivorous and they are terrifying but majestic and beautiful. And every year on Thisbe, in the month of November, even though it's fucking freezing, they have a Capel Ishka horse race on the beach. The world has a nice mythos surrounding the Capel Ishka and the relationship with the island. And we have our two main characters, Sean Kendrick, who is initially you might think he's going to be dark, brooding, bad boy, but he's not. He's more like socially awkward. Horse guy who's really quiet and then Puck Conley or Kate Conley, who is our female protagonist, who they both enter the race to prove something and to get something and improve their lives, and that's the basic premise.
It's such a well put together book. I was thinking of it as I was coming here in that like a lot of books you read and you're like, okay, the author's trying to fit all these jigsaws together, and sometimes they get it, and sometimes the pieces are a little bit loose. But like this book knows what it wants to do from the beginning, and it gets there from the beginning to the end. Each of the pieces is really well put together. I'll make an argument about how the chapters work. The way she uses the viewpoints, switching back and forth, is actually really effective in a way that I don't think a lot of the books we've read have been.
I would say
Um,
it's one of the most effective usages of
mhm.
multiple viewpoints that we have ever read outside of My Dear Novik and Spinning Silver.
Well, okay. No, I mean, and my dear A Song of Ice and Fire. But let's take a shot, guys. This is, by the way, one of our Patreon live streams. It's a mid-month book. So it's one me and Maria pick, but our end-of-month book is one that everybody else gets to pick. For this month, it's Nettle and Bone, which also people have been liking. I haven't started it yet, but I'm
So
excited. It
glad.
looks like just a chill read. Yeah, me and Maria, you guys haven't seen the videos, but we're so tired from mediocre books. So yeah. And actually, this one book really reminded me of one that we probably won't release the video for a while, called Lore, which is about like secret world Greek god death competition. And this book is in a lot of ways everything I wanted from that book in terms of the world building, because I was very disappointed in that book that it was a secret world, because then it's essentially our world, but just with this like underground element. Whereas I really wanted to see how that would affect the world. And in this book, there's like one weird thing, like in that book, the Kapalishka, but like there's so many ways they integrate into the world in a really smart, interesting way. Like if this had been a secret horse race underground society, that would not have been as interesting
As
as this
good.
book.
The other thing I think this book does really well, something that you guys have known because I've complained about it a lot lately, is I am really so tired of books doing too many things and cramming too much in one book. Especially like I don't know why series are so like
Prone to this.
prone to this. Like I think the one of the only one shots we read that did this was Priory of the Orange Tree, which again, in retrospect, I looked back on much more fondly than I did at the time. Um,
There's one
but
element of it I look back on very fondly over
I
time.
know,
Others I don't.
I know. But this book has a tight scope. It knows the story it's telling. It's around a specific thing, and it just tells the shit out of it. You know, it and the thing is, it's one of those things where if you don't like the fundamental conceit, because there's not 900 other things happening, you're not gonna. It's like in Mask of Mirrors, some people disliked one of the point of view characters, but there was like four others, and as long as you like those four others, you could deal with that one not working. But in this book, if you are not here for like two people bonding with horses and getting to know each other, like this ain't for you. Like
That's
this,
something some people said on the Discord too. Is they're like, I'm not a horse person, and like I don't think you really need to be a horse person to like this book. But it's like, yeah, no, if you're not into the main conceit, it's not really for you. It reminded me a little bit of Sabriel in that like it's a book that kind of exercised everything that wasn't core to the story, and so in certain ways I find it hard to critique because it is just the book it wants to be completely. Angry Otter said, I do really appreciate that Scorpio Races is a standalone tight story. Yeah, if there had been 900 sequels, this would not have been good. Again, I'm with Maria. I would love to read a 70K um, fanfic of what happens afterwards. Even though I
oh
didn't
my
ship it, I
god,
think because Maria
I
did. But
shipped
like,
it so fucking hard, man.
and then Pearl NH says plot, theme, and characters of Scorpio Races were drum tight. Yeah, exactly. It was just like it's interesting because she just knew exactly what she wanted to do and was able to do that. There's a few elements that I feel like could have been given a little bit more nuance, but again, I was very surprised by how naturalistic and non overly emotional this book was. Really, when I thought going in it was going to be like, UST, bitchy hot boy and girl, and like,
Sassy
enemies to
main
love.
character.
Right. And the main character actually is sassy is the funny thing, but like nobody else thinks she's that funny, so it helps.
Yeah, she's like tempestuous, and they're also for me. I forgot who it was, but someone had mentioned in the Discord that they thought the main characters, like the point of view, sounded very similar. and for me, one of the things that I thought was done really well is that in Puck's point of view, there was a lot of these like funny lines that she like. There was one where it was like she was suffering because she'd only gotten 3 hours of sleep, and then her sister was suffering because she got more than 3. Like, and she sets up these weird where like the first part of the sentence reads fine, but then by the time you get to the second part of the sentence, it made the first part funny, and she does that all the time in Puck's narration, and you really get a sense for Puck's humor, and I really enjoyed it.
I think the other thing is that like they both have asides in their thoughts, but Puck I felt like had a few more, and also hers tended to be funnier than Sean's, where like he's thinking about something tragic in his past, and she's like thinking about this time she yelled at another kid or something like that, which I really liked. Let's see. Oh, Angry Otter said, I had bad experiences with horses when I was a kid, so horses eating people was totally believable to me. Okay, so story time. I worked at a stable when I was younger, and it was they would take like special needs children on the horses and do stuff. So it was like a charity, and that meant that a lot of the horses they had were not great. Like they're not your cream of the crop horses. And so yeah, I have a lot of horror stories of horses too. That like there was one who hated blondes and would charge the end of the stable and bounce into it if a blonde passed by. Yeah. Horses are absolutely fucking terrifying. They're huge, and they have like these cinder block teeth that clack together. Like if you ever see them eat an apple, they'll just like they'll explode it. They're very temperamental. They're not bicycles, which is a pain. So yeah, horses terrifying, and I love in this book.
Did anyone want horses to be bicycles?
I would love horses to be bicycles. I would love that. If bicycles make so much more sense than horses. I don't, the strange majesty of a horse is great in literature, and then in real life, they stink and they poop a lot, and it's gross, and they're also huge. And if they step on your foot, it really hurts.
We have some funny comments about the sassiness of Puck. So Icefield says, I liked that she tried very hard to be sassy. Miss Ali said it didn't have that dramatique YA feeling, which I appreciated. And then Angry Otter said, I liked how she acknowledged when she couldn't come up with something sassy and kept her mouth shut. Or when other people did something cool and she's like, I'm gonna do that later. Like she just felt very organic to I just saw a really funny comment, sorry.
But bicycles eating people isn't as dramatic. Fair point. Right. Again, from a literary point of view, there's a horror movie moment in this one with a black horse that's going after them. That's like so cool and dramatic. But as a bicycle, that would also be pretty funny. Yeah. I did like how the horses were treated in this book overall, though. I thought that was really interesting, and again, as a metaphor for like the sea, both powerful and dangerous, but also entrancing, I thought it worked really well. And and then going back to Puck, I think the thing about it is that the author wasn't overly enamored with the character, so the character is allowed to be kind of shit at times at things, and so it's not like a Mary Sue situation where you automatically, or at least I automatically, am like, I'm contrary, I don't like that the author's making me like this character. She understands that Puck is kind of a dork in certain ways at certain times,
and that she's not like naturally just good at any one thing. Like she cooks, but she's not necessarily the greatest cook. Like she's has a really good bond with her horse stuff, but it's only through like training that she actually gets like semi-decent. The main characters were really good. A couple of people had made the comment that the side characters were fumbled a bit, and I will agree with that. There were a couple characters I enjoyed, and then there was like a weird side character plot that just like didn't
go
finish
anywhere?
Like it didn't. I really was hoping it would like tie a knot, partially because I was like, that's kind of cute, but it didn't go anywhere.
And it was barely there, if I'm thinking of the same one as you. Like I was like, oh, that's interesting, and then just no, like it was just like, okay.
Yeah, we're probably thinking about the same thing, because it's just the only side plot that gets mentioned that goes absolutely nowhere.
Peggy and Gabe.
No.
I'm messing with you.
He has. Oh my god,
I have
guys.
theories about Gabe that we'll get into as the book as this video goes on.
Gabe wanting to leave because his parents were brutally murdered by Kapil Ishka that the island reveres and fears, and not wanting to be in this space anymore was not enough of a reason for Gabe wanting to leave the island. He was like, was he having an affair with Peggy? Did he get a girl pregnant? Is he gay? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure. Yes, Miss Allie Snow, it was George and Annie Maud. The one that I was talking about. But no, I think Gabe just wanted to leave Will. I don't think there was a secret conspiracy the author was hiding from us.
Okay, here's the thing. I understand you have a master's, but you have to understand that sometimes in literature, authors are doing things beneath the surface of the plot and the characters. So they're trying to talk about deeper themes and hint at things without just telling you in a list.
You sound like a conspiracy theorist. My God.
It's the deep state.
Someone said, why would he leave if he has that hot MILF? Exactly.
Fair
also
point.
Not founded. And then, as Jesse says, Gabe wanted the fuck out. That's it. Ooh, Angry Otter though does say I caught the affair vibe.
That's what I'm saying.
And then Echo Blade, you're Zeta, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Dory and Peg were the only side characters who were really meaningful to me. The American Holly was weird. Gabe and his situation was a little more core to Puck's story. And then Celia says, no, it's such a good reason. I've been living abroad for years now, and I could connect to Gabe so much. He just wanted out. He wanted a different life. It's a tiny island. His family's not even from there. Like, calm down, Will, with your conspiracy theorists.
Look, I'm just saying, thematically, I think there's more going on than you're giving the author credit for. I loved Holly as a character, but the thing with Annie just didn't go anywhere. Yeah, which is too bad. Like, the book ends sort of abruptly, which we'll talk about the staccato tone of it more, but the curtains are fucking blue, Will. Not if you're colorblind, so that's ableism going on there, guys. Not pretty. But let's go. But I'm gonna put you on main screen so we can jump into the plot, and also because I'm gonna drink something and I don't want to take up sound space. There you
go. Hi guys. Okay, so this book starts with a flashback to a young Sean Kendrick at the start of a Scorpio race when he was 10. His dad was going to race on this beautiful, and at the time you're like, what's so scary about these horses? Because you don't know nothing about them. His dad's going to ride on this beautiful red blood-colored stallion, and you're like, okay, a horse race. And then like the young Sean Kendrick is like, don't eat my dad, and you're like, why are you telling the horse not to eat your dad? That's kind of weird, my guy. And then you realize these are carnivore horses that live in the sea sometimes. And I have to say, this premise could have been really dumb, you know, like it could have in the wrong hands, this could have been fucking hysterical.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's not. It's terrifying, and the author puts in the work to make it feel that way, and part of it is that the world is very grounded, and that element is integrated really, really well. But yeah, it's a ridiculous idea to begin with, and it's so unique, but I do love it.
Seahorses. Anyway, and the race starts, and his dad kind of almost immediately gets bumped off of his seat, and then just gets trampled by a bunch of the Kapalishka. But the red stallion listened and didn't eat his dad. Oh, good to know. And then we have a jump like 7 years into the future. Maybe how old are they? I want to like 19, 17? 19. 9 years into the future, and we are presented with our two main characters, Puck Conley, aka Kate Conley, Sean Kendrick. Sean, since the death of his father, has been working at the
stables.
Benjamin Mulvane?
The one rich guy in town.
Yeah, Mulvane.
Really quickly though, Angry Otter said it has magical realism vibes, like that. This is just how it is.
How it is, yep.
That, and one thing that the book does really well, again, is it integrates the small details into the world. But the other thing that helps is the actual where she puts it, and that not that these are like dumb hicks, but like this is an island where this has just always been. They're not like, oh, what's the biology of how this works? It makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily know these things in the same way that a normal person doesn't really know how a car engine works. It just works. Like there's an extent to which these aren't people in a university where you would have to give an example of it. Like this is an isolated town where they just don't care about the scientific part of that.
They do not. But yeah, he works at the Malvern. Thank you, Zeta, for spelling that out for me. Stable yard, and he is kind of like the head horse guy. He's in charge of like he makes sure when the horses are born, they're taken care of. He raises them.
He's a horse wunderkind.
Yes, and
he's like the only one who can handle the death horses at times.
Yes. So he not only this stable not only has like normal, really good racy horses, but it also has Kapelishka, which are the bitey seahorses. And they currently have 3, and it's getting close to the race. He knows he's going to race, but him and Benjamin Malvern, who's his boss's son, don't get along well because Sean is real good at horse stuff, which his dad appreciates. But Mutt is just a useless potato. And I liked, because Mutt could have been a really dumb character at certain points. And he was, for the most part, he's just like the bully character. But you understood the absolute frustration and this rivalry that had been brewing. Like, Mutt is just not as good as Sean.
So
pretty much anything.
I think Mutt is saved by how good the rest of the book is and how real the book feels, but he's very much to me the part of the book that he's a blunt instrument, and he's the part of the book to me that felt the least real. Like it very much feels like, oh, this is Draco Malfoy, but with horses, and like the reason he doesn't like the main character is because the main character is good at things, which as a motivation, like I felt like more could have been done with him, but
yes,
at the same time, it's not exactly a problem that nothing is done with him. He's an antagonistic force for really well sketched and drawn characters.
There's
a couple of comments. Miss Allie Snow says that prologue was actually an interesting microcosm of the book as a whole. It's a slow burn, then death, and then the end. And then Zeta says there's an author's note at the end of the audiobook where the author notes how it took her a long time to really figure out how to write the story and not too bizarrely magical. That's actually really interesting. We listened to the audiobook, which I will make a comment about at the end of the book. But that actually would have been really interesting to read. She actually made a little book trailer for the book that you should look up. That's pretty cool that I saw. And then Shelby says, the horror around the horses worked so well, but it could have been hilarious if they went more of a Jurassic Park route. Yeah, that's funny, but like kind of like Jurassic Park, when we actually read the book, there is such a sense of dread. Like there was such a sense of dread around the Velociraptors and how well that's set up. That's almost set up the same way with the Kapelishka. And then... Yeah, I'm looking through these.
I got the sense the island was just one of the Kapelishka's favorite stomping grounds, which didn't really need more justification than that. I
got the sense, like in my head canon, that this is the area that they live in. They're almost like a very not an endangered species, but they're not one that spreads out.
Yes, I took it as like they migrate because it's this time of year.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's specifically this is the time of year, this September, because there's a point where she's talking to that one guy who's kind of into her. There's those twin brothers who are fishermen. And she's like, you got to be brave to fish in the September sea because that's when the Kapelishka come. Like this is their season. But something I wanted to highlight, Miss Allie Snow says, the more I read, the more I disliked Benjamin more than Mutt, which I think is super valid. And Pearl has a good comment. Mutt's daddy's issues could have been highlighted more. I think if we could have seen more interaction between Mutt and Benjamin, it would have helped humanize Mutt a bit more instead of him just being like playground bully.
Or even if he like was nice to his friends, like they saw, like the thing is even bullies are like have friends and nice moments, and I think that would have helped a lot if it was just very clear that like, okay, it's Sean he has a problem with.
Yeah, his dad provoked his worst nature intentionally.
And then Angry Otter also had one. He says, Holly has a discussion with Sean about why they have water horses and no one else does, and it does a good job of characterizing the setting. The island has a special connection to the murder horses. One of the little it's really small, but it's mentioned at one point that the horses, you can't take them from the island. And like that I like, because it's like, oh yeah, the government would have rules about a species like this in terms of it being, so it gives the sense that like, oh, there is people who try to understand them, and there is all this other stuff that's happening outside, but these characters, it's not important.
I'm sorry, guys.
Okay.
I'm not.
What are we looking at? Cat cam?
Look,
you know,
wait, let me see if I can get him.
I was gonna say he's just a black silhouette.
Oh God.
Okay, all right.
He's sorry. There he is. He's lying with his little, like, his eyes are underneath. That's the bottom of his jaw.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's turned up. He's so cute.
He's so cute.
I like Data despite his like ridiculousness. But yeah, and so that's pretty much Sean. Getting back to the recap a little bit. That's Sean. One of the other things I really liked about his character is that he's not bitchy hot boy, which is like my least favorite character archetype, and I really thought going in he was going to be, and he's not. He's very quiet. And the thing that's interesting is that in my own writing, I tend to like to write really quiet characters, but I learned early on it's very hard to characterize characters who just don't talk or engage with other people. Like, it's very hard to do, but she really nails it. He doesn't say a lot, and yet you really immediately get a sense for his character and like who he is.
And he's got like a very, I don't want to say staccato way of speaking, but he says the thing he means to say immediately, and there's no beating around the bush. And when he does say something, it's because he actually means it, versus Puck, who will sometimes talk a lot trying to get to the point of what she's thinking, or she won't know exactly what she's trying to communicate, but she's going to talk through it.
Or she has a feeling that she's uncomfortable with, so she says something she sort of externalizes it that way, whereas he just doesn't say things.
And it's so interesting because, like, from his point of view, initially you're like, ooh, maybe he's a broody bad boy. And then you see him from Puck's point of view, and you're just like, oh no, this guy just doesn't talk. There's this one point where she was like, if you want to find Sean Kendrick, look for someone standing slightly apart from everyone else, but who's still able to observe shit. And that'll be him. And it really works. I think Sean is a very difficult character to pull off, like Will said. And
so much so. And yet she nails it from like the word go. I want to do like a close reading of the first couple of chapters to really see how she nails it. But then, so our other main character is Puck, who is redheaded, freckled, feisty girl, essentially. I felt like she was a little bit too much, not an author insert, but like a reader insert at times. Like, she ended up being a little bit more of a reader insert than Sean ended up being a bad boy, I felt like. But at the same time, that's fine. It's a character archetype.
See, I didn't get that. I thought she had a very concrete... She reminded me of Agnieszka.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, Agnieszka is also kind of that character where they're just like headstrong.
But they're also happy with their little lives. They like their village. They like that's where they want to be. They like their life, and they will work towards the betterment of themselves. But like, that's the sum total of their like grand ideals. And so she definitely gave me Agnieszka vibes. And
she's also just very endearing at times, especially her relationship with her brothers is so great. Because what happens is that she is part of the family called, what is it? The McConnellys?
The Connellys. It's just the Connellys.
I couldn't, whatever. And they are kind of like, they hold themselves back a little bit from the rest of the island, but her mother and father died. They got eaten by Kapolishka. I don't remember how much earlier in the year. It was like, was it a year or was it like 3? I don't remember.
Years.
It's been a couple years, yeah. And so she lives with her brother Finn, who is younger than her, and Gabe. And Finn is just a fun character throughout the entire book. He's so funny because he doesn't like to talk about certain things. So like, he doesn't like compliments, and he likes to work on cars. And she was like, oh, and then she mentioned that somebody found him cute, and she's like, oh, I forgot that was one of the topics he doesn't like to talk about is him and the other gender. And like, it's just very cute.
Also, I think the
oh, you're right,
my OCD boy.
Oh, I'm dumb. That's what that's about.
And also, he might have been, ASD on the spectrum. I read him because he has his like routines. She talks about he likes his routine. So either OCD, but he's definitely neurodivergent. I read him as, and I fucking loved him because he's competent, he's fun, he's just chilling, he's just existing. You know, like we deal with a lot of like not great neurodivergent representation in the books we've read, and he was just such a fantastic like character that I was like, I'm pretty sure he's
And then it
neurodivergent.
loops around to being important. Yeah, because what happened is that Valerie had said, "My OCD boy," and so there's a point where they mentioned that he washes his hands for a really long time, and I was like, at the time, I didn't really think anything of it, but yeah, that actually might have been an OCD thing, and I just
Yep.
didn't catch it.
And when he was anxious, he just literally cleaned the whole house, and he has
Oh,
his
you're
routines
right.
and the way he likes fiddling with things. And like there were so many things. There are certain things you can't talk to him about because he doesn't like to broach those topics. Like he doesn't, so much of that it is just like I loved him so much. Finn is one of my favorite parts. That part at the end when he starts walking and she's like, and he had a strut to his walk. I was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
Finn, you absolute cutie. I wanna eat you.
So no, he's a great character. Go ahead.
Yeah. A couple of people have some good thoughts. I thought Finn might be on the spectrum, TBH. He can be both OCD and have autism. But the cleaning the house when he's stressed about Puck is very relatable.
Well, and also I thought that went back to them trying to be their own little family a little bit. Like he was trying to make house because he makes her chocolate at one point, even though he's very bad at it.
Valerie says, my brother and I both have some OCD tendencies, and I adored him so much. And then Angry Otter says how they had to tell him to stop washing his hands. My son is autistic, and I have to do that with him. And then Miss Allie Snow points out, and he picks at his arms when he's nervous. And then Jesse says he also hyper focuses on machines and mechanics, which is something I also identify with. He just, like, it's never outwardly stated that he's neurodivergent, which I think is like the best way to do it. But he's just so fantastic and fun and lovely, and he feels real, like as a character.
He really does, and it helps his relationship with Puck, especially later in the book. I love the scene where he went to sleep in her room, and he was like, "This is not an everyday thing. This is just until after the race," and that was just so nice. Yeah, because he has his rules. He's like, "No, it's this and it's that," and I have no emotion, but it's cute because he's a kid.
Or when she said, I have principles, and he was like, how can you change your principles? You said that this was a principle, like that kind of like rigidity of
that
thinking.
actually also could be, an autistic thing in that they don't like rule changes. But I also liked that in terms of like, I trusted you, and the principle, you can't change a principle.
Principles.
But
yeah, so that's her younger brother. Angry Otter said the real MVP, Finn. Mwah. Love it.
Well, and we'll talk about that towards the end. But who's the other brother?
Gabe, who I do not think is gay, nor was having an affair with Peggy, and who I also just think didn't get a girl pregnant. Gabe is their older brother. He
okay, I had my phone muted because I didn't want to subject you guys to me drinking from my water bottle. But there absolutely could have been more going on.
There could have been, but I don't think it was.
He abandoned his siblings. Like that scene in There Will Be Blood. He abandoned his siblings. Not cool. Might be because I'm Hispanic, and so you can never abandon family. But
yes,
who knows about Irish people?
Anyway, Gabe is the eldest. He has been supporting the family, working at as an assistant for fishing. So he always smells fishy. He works late a lot. And towards the beginning of this book, you get the sense that he has been keeping a bit distance. And he basically tells them very early on that he is going to be leaving the island. And our main character, Puck, loves the island. She loves the mythos of the races, the Kapell Ishka. She loves the kind of like grittiness of it all.
The bleak. It reminded me of like I don't remember, whatever those sisters who wrote those books. I'm blanking on all of their names, but like the beauty of the moors they would talk about in
the Bronte sisters.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, where it's the bleak, and you actually see pictures of like those moors, and you're like, it's just majestic and wild and bleak and so gorgeous. And that was the feeling I got too.
Yes. And he's like, I'm going to the mainland. Like, I can't.
Well, hold on. First, some evidence. Angry Otter said, and he's talking about Gabe, he was all whispering in her ear, and Tommy jumped up to keep Puck from going in the kitchen with Gabe and Peg. That's all I'm saying. There's definitely material there.
I mean, maybe, but I don't know. Celia says, "Don't come at me, Will. You will never know the guilt that comes of with leaving your family to do what is best for yourself."
I mean,
Absolutely.
okay. There's also that is a complicated topic, but in this situation, I felt like he really was abandoning his siblings when they needed him. But we can get into that more as we go on. I think the book actually handles it in a fairly nuanced way.
I agree. Anyway, so Gabe's gonna leave, and this is what prompts Puck, because like the races are about to start, and Puck, in this moment when Gabe says he's gonna leave, she doesn't want him to. She wants him to stay, and he was like, "I'm gonna leave next week." And then she was like, I'm gonna ride in the races," and he's like, "No, you're fucking not." And she's like, "Yes, I am. Watch me fucking do it." And she says it just to annoy him, because she knows that he would be pissed because their parents were literally brutally murdered by some Kapel Ishka. And then it will also force him to stay until the races are over to, make sure she's still alive by the end of it. And she kind of commits to it that way in the hopes that he'll just say, "I'm not leaving." But what ends up happening is she discovers that Gabe has been hiding from them, that their parents didn't own their house. They've just been living under the assumption that it was just their parents' house. This is where they live. But after she announces that she's going to race, which a lot of people in the village don't like, and try to talk her out of, Benjamin Malvern comes and says, "Hey, I own this house and nobody's paid rent on it in a year. You guys have to leave unless you can give me the entire amount." And Puck's like, "Oh God, not only do I now have to do the races because I said I would to Gabe, but now I kind of have to win, because how else are we going to keep this house?" And so she's working off of the like her like, she said she was going to do this thing to spite her brother, but she also somehow she wants this to make him stay, but now she also kind of financially needs to. And it's just such a good, because she says it as a tempestuous like teenager. She's like, "I'm going to ride in the races."
Like, she kind of blurts things when she has emotion. Things like when the kettle over pots or the pot over kettles or whatever. Maria would know the thing because she knows about food. Like when that starts to happen, she says something almost to take the stress off of it, to put down the heat. And in that case, she was just there. Okay, so there's some actually interesting discussion in the comments.
Yes.
Existential Screaming says Gabe was going to send money back too, right?
Yes.
And the thing about it is that that's not stated till really late, and Gabe doesn't state it. He never is like, "Hey guys, I gotta leave and I'll send you money back." That's stated really late in the book.
Yeah.
It's stated really late in the book. It's not stated as a reason for him to leave. I would have liked more if that was the reason he told them, and then later it came out that he just who put it this way? Oh, I'm an older sibling, and I probably would have wanted to leave Evil Horse Island too, but I'm still mad at Gabe on Pink Fin. So, like, I would have liked if it came out that, like, no, he just wanted to leave Evil Horse Island later on, as like that's actually his motivating factor.
But he justifies it to them by like, "I'll send you money, then we can keep the house."
Yeah, and then Miss Sally Snow says, "I thought early on Gabe shut down the idea of them coming with him. He wanted them to get jobs at the mill." Yeah, I think he did too. I think he was like, "No, I'm just going." So and, Gabe's not a great communicator, so that's probably part of it. But I would have liked if that had been done. I mean, it's not really a problem with the book. Like we're talking about it a lot, but it functions well. Gabe does feel like a real person. And going back to the guy saying that her house isn't owned and so she needs to win the race, the book does this thing that's really nice where it constantly ratchets up how much importance the race has for both of the characters. Where originally she just wants Gabe to stay, and then it's money. And for Finn, it starts out as like, "I'm just going to race because that's what I normally do."
Sean.
Sean. But then it's like, oh, I need to do it to get the horse, and then it's like, okay, but also I don't want Puck to die in this race. And so I
Yeah.
thought that was really well done in terms of the structure of the novel and the underlying tension.
I thought that was such a great, and it was also the way this book works is it starts with really low stakes because it's world building and just giving you a really good idea of like it pulls a little bit of a spinning silver where it really couches you a little bit as the story goes on in the mechanics of the world, like the butcher shop because people need meat to feed their kapelishka is where you go to announce that you're going to race and where you put name on the board. And it's such an interesting world building piece that in an island where you have meat eating horses, the butcher shop is going to be one of the most important buildings. But as you learn more of the town, more of the stakes, more of the mythos around the Kapel Ishka just slowly build on. And it really helps the story unfurl in a really organic way.
Yeah, there's a part towards the end that we'll talk about where it talks about the beliefs of some on the island about the races, and I was like, oh my god, that's such a great world building note, and it really ties the stakes of it. It ratchets up the stakes and the feeling of how real this world feels. So one thing is that one of Sean's first chapters, I think it's the first one after the prologue, is him gathering blood that's being a cow's being butchered, and so he's gathering blood for his horse just because it's like a good thing. There's two things about the scene that I noticed that are really good writing. The first is that she describes the cobbles of the ground and how they're kind of uneven over time and because of roots, and I was like, oh, that is such a fantastic little just descriptive detail because it really makes you feel like, oh, I've seen that before. It ties you into the world. And the other is that the guy who's butchering the cow is doing it poorly, and like he says, like there's a way to do it correctly even though you wouldn't think that, and it's such a nice moment of like, oh yeah, Sean Kendrick would know that there's a correct and a wrong way to butcher a horse, and he would be able to see it, whereas if or butcher a cow, whereas like if I saw somebody butchering a cow, I'd just be like whatever. But like there is such a sense that he's really an expert in his field and that he knows what he's doing, and both of those things make the world feel real and help characterize him.
Yep. So Puck joins the race, and initially she was like, she goes to, because at the start, before people fully commit to racing, there's like all the Kapel Ishka sellers go to the beach and have the Kapel Ishka, and this is another really great scene with Sean where there is this white and black piebald mare, who this one guy is like fastest horse, faster than your red stallion, Kendrick. Like super fucking fast. And he gets on the horse and she is really fast, but she's also dangerous. Immediately he's like, you should not sell that horse to anyone. She gonna fucking eat someone. Dangerous. Which kind of screws up this guy's like sale because everybody's like, well, if Sean Kendrick says don't get on that horse, we're not gonna get on that horse. We also see a scene where one of the Kapel Ishka goes to attack someone, and everybody's like, Sean Kendrick! Like, throughout the book, anytime shit's going down with the Kapel Ishka, people are just like, where's Sean Kendrick? Get him here! And so you get to see him kind of calm this horse down and, like, do this interaction. Oh, no, that was earlier. Mutt Malvern was trying to...
This happens multiple times. Like, how many people... What's the kill count in this book from Kapel Ishka? Like... 4 people and a dog, and then and like 2 horses, a cat's tail. Yeah, what happened is initially, Mutt had been trying to get a horse from the sea, because they have to trap him, and it doesn't go well, so they have to get Sean in the middle of the night, and it eats somebody's shoulder, and then he's like, "Okay, put it back in the ocean, guys." And this is the beginning of the enmity between him and Mutt.
Or the beginning of your understanding of it, because he's like, don't you dare release that. I captured that horse. Don't you? And that would be like stealing. And Sean's like, fuck you, I'm letting this thing back out. Like, sorry.
Because again, he knows. And that's what's really fascinating is that, like, he really, he loves the normal horses, but he also really understands the Kapel Ishka and the respect that they demand. And that's one of the next things that happens is that he has a horse called Kor. Who is the horse who killed his daddy, and it took me way too long into the book to realize that.
No. It's not the horse who killed his dad. His father fell off of Kor and got trampled by all the other Kapel Ishka. He told Kor, don't eat dad, and Kor listened and did not eat dad. Kor is good boy.
Core is actually remarkably good
Good
boy for
boy.
being a carnivorous horse. Yeah, and but yeah, so Core is like his horse, and they go like train in the water or whatever. And it's a great scene because you can see the dance of like Core is testing him, but Sean also knows his limits, and so he's testing him back. And there is that kind of interesting. It contrasts well with Puck's relationship with Dawn, which is her pony
Dove.
or horse, as she would say. What did I say?
You said Dawn.
Oh, Dove. Um, who again is a pony, but she would call a horse. Which is like their relationship is based off of love and affection, and his and Core's is based off of like respect for pushing each other back and forth. And at one point he says that like Core is who made him who he is, and that's like such an interesting a part of the book to me that I thought really worked really well.
The other thing that kind of connects to this is the way Sean interacts with the horses is completely different from everybody else. Like, it's almost like a mysticism.
It is. It's like he's almost like a shaman. He knows all these like little things to do. Like he'll braid their hair as they're riding. He spits on his hand before he touches them to let them know where he is all the
Is
time.
He'll trace the veins in their neck with like a piece of a specific metal to like calm them down. He has all these like it's ritualistic, and it is fascinating because nobody else like this is why he is so good with them. This is what his father taught him, in how to interact. Like he'll to keep them from moving past where he wants. He'll draw a circle in the sand and then spit in it, and the horse like knows. Okay, I
Like
don't
a
go
binding
past this.
circle.
Yeah, and so it's weird because it feels like magical demon binding kind of thing, but it's just these like mundane actions.
Well, and the thing about it, well, that's what's interesting to me is you don't know how magic the horses are and how much not. How much of this is just the way that they respond. Like at one point, he kills a horse with holly or something like that, which is
Yeah,
like a magical thing. But like maybe they are just allergic to
allergic to
holly as a
holly.
species, so it's sort of like plausibly deniable. Again, if you were in a university, you would need to figure the book would be like, okay, I actually got to tell you. But because they're on this isolated island where this is just how it's always been, the book doesn't need to, and I really enjoyed that.
It was so good. But anyway, so Puck goes and she's like, I gotta get a horse. And she's trying to get someone to give it to her for a fifth, which is basically if she wins, they take 4/5 of the winning and she gets to keep 1/5, which effectively pays for the horse on the back end, which is a gamble on whoever is selling, like letting you ride the horse. And she was like, I'm going to get a Kapalishka. And she gets on the piebald mare because he's the only guy who will even consider letting her do a fifth with him.
Because
And
she is woman's with womb. Ew.
yeah, and
Girl
like,
cooties.
and she has no money. Like if she, because there
Yeah,
was a
well, that
couple
too.
people like, if you have money, I will give you the horse. And she's like, I got nothing. I got hopes and dreams. And she gets on the piebald mare, and her brother Finn is there with her, and he was like Finn is just like, this is a terrible idea. I don't like this. And then the piebald mare eats a dog while she is on it, and she's like, fuck it, I'm gonna ride Dove. And this is massive because this is a Capel Ishka race. They are bigger, faster, stronger than normal horses.
And they like to eat other horses.
Like it's your dinner, like in a
This is
race.
such a bad idea.
And during the race, the horses get really. One of the things you learn in that first scene where his dad gets trampled to death is the horses fight each other while they're doing the heckin' racing. Like this is not just everybody single-mindedly focused on the finish line. Like, nah, motherfuckers, nope. And so she's like, I'm gonna ride Dove. It's a principle, and Finn's like, yes, this good decision, solid.
Because yeah, the principle is that like, oh, Kapalishka killed my parents, so I'm not gonna
Yeah.
go in. And so Finn's like, okay, cool.
Good. And it's more just like she got really scared in that moment because she was genuinely considering getting a Kapalishka, and then she was like, "Oh no, that nope." And here's a decent reason why I can get out of doing it. Because Puck does that a lot, where she'll do something and then she'll have to justify it afterwards, which I think is very realistic because I think as humans we do that regularly. But anyway, She decides she's going to race. The next morning, she's down on the beach with her horsey, and she can train in the water because one of the issues with the Kapalishka is they want to go back to the ocean, motherfuckers, and they will drag you down with them. So if you do not have good control on your Kapalishka, motherfuckers running into the water and taking you down too, bro. And she's just like in the water doing a thing. But the problem is, you don't have to just worry about the other racers Kapalishka on the beach. This is Kapalishka season. Them motherfuckers just popping out of the water. There is a scene early on in the book where her and Finn are kind of close to the water, and a Kapalishka kind of jumps out and is like walking past, and they're like, don't move. They love chasing moving targets, and they just like sit still, and you're like, it has this nice edge of like spokenness and like, oh no, tension. So she's just in the water training Dove, and Sean Kendrick comes on down and is like, why the fuck is there someone on a normal goddamn horse in the water? Like, he doesn't care that it's a girl. He's just like, what is that person doing? But he's like, I'm gonna just do my thing. And he's out there. He's got his 3 horses that his Kapalishka that he's bringing in, which is Kor, who is his favorite. And now something to explain from now is Kor is not his horse. Kor is his horse in the sense that Kor is the horse his father and him. Actually, I'm pretty sure Sean's the one who captured Kor out of the water. It's mentioned multiple times. But Kor was his dad's horse when his dad died, and the Mulverns took him in. It became the Mulvern's horse. And he has tried on multiple occasions to buy Kor from Mulvern, and he will not sell him. And so he's bound to the Mulvern yard, as a job, but also because he cannot leave Kor. He loves this horse. But he has
It reminded me, no, I was going to say, there's a documentary called Blackfish, I think, about
Blackfin?
that. No, I think it's Blackfish.
It might be Blackfish.
I think I'm right. For once, I remember a thing. I don't remember the author, though. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, it's a documentary about that killer whale that ate someone in a thing. And one of the things I remember is the
SeaWorld? In SeaWorld?
Yeah, SeaWorld.
Yeah.
The trainers talking about how, like, one of the reasons they stayed, even though they knew it was an abusive relationship for the dolphins, or not the dolphins, the
Orca.
killer whales. Yeah, is that like they're not theirs. They spend all this time with them and they bond, but they're not theirs, and they didn't want to leave them, even though they knew this was not good for them, because it's. And I got a little bit of that vibe with Sean of like, he loves this thing that isn't his, and like he stays because that's what he does, but like he stays in this situation for Kor. And I thought that was like such an interesting idea.
It really is. I really enjoyed their relationship. Anyway, and so he's out there, and then he's doing some training stuff, and everybody else is like staying out of the ocean, just like training on the beaches. And then all of a sudden he hears, like, again, somebody's like, Sean Kendrick, and he looks, and it's because a Kapalishka has come out of the water and is attacking Puck and Dove. And he's like, God damn it. So he like gets into the water. He like fights the Kapalishka, and this is where he has to take the holly out of his pocket, and he puts it on the Kapalishka's snout, and it causes it to die. And he's like, man, I haven't had to kill a Kapalishka in a long time. This sucks. And then he ends up getting taken under the water, and then Puck has to like lift his head out to keep him from drowning. And as he kind of comes to in the water, he goes, keep your horse off this goddamn beach. He just says, keep your horse off of this beach. And he's not trying to be, he's not trying to be an asshole. He's literally just like, you nearly died, motherfucker. Like, it's dangerous. This is not the place for a normal horse right now.
I loved so much that it wasn't an overwrought UST, like, enemies to lovers, like, stay off the beach, you goddamn bitch. Not that, because I sound like I'm in the
Women
50s.
don't belong here.
Yeah, or something like that, or he's so mad at her and he doesn't know why. It's funny because Maria made the comment on the Discord that if you look at him objectively and you think of him as not being good looking, he's really just kind of a dork. Like, he kind of is just like a horse person who likes what he does and is maybe a little socially awkward. And that's how he is. He's very like, he's not dramatic about this stuff. And that's one of the things I really appreciated, is it made him and Puck's dynamic a lot more interesting and real feeling than like, oh, so hot.
Yeah.
Oh.
and because she takes it badly, she's like, "Oh man, this guy told me to keep off the beach. Oh no, like what a dick." And he's just like, because he could have said, "Listen, it's super dangerous. You need to think about what you're doing." But it's Sean Kendrick. He just goes, "Stay off the beach." Like, I don't know what to tell you. So she goes and she's like freaked out. Dove is freaked out. And so she starts going on the beach like super early in the morning before other people get there. And eventually, like, the two of them kind of befriend each other through a bit of necessity. Like, there's a point where they end up in a car together going into town, and he says, "Listen, I have an extra Kapalishka if you would like to ride her." And it's him being like, "You're good at horses. Like, you obviously want to do this."
Again, he's an awkward horse guy, so the way he offers like some friendship is through a horse.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of makes sense if you think of it that way, because you're not in his viewpoint when he offers to do it, but you get that like this is him, because like he's very direct. He's like, "Would you like a horse?" You
Yeah.
know, not
And
like,
she's
"Okay,
like,
are we friends now?"
yeah, and she's like, "Is he trying to like what's his angle here? Why would he say that?" And it's just him being like, "Listen, you're gonna go in this race. You probably should be on a Kapalishka."
I've now heard your reasons for being in the race, and
Yeah.
I understand this is us bonding.
And so she ends up they end up meeting at a cliff, and he presents, and it's this unnamed mare that he has, and he's not sure if she's any good. Like, she's a little hard to handle, but he figures it would be better than like going into the race with Dove. And she's like, "Do you think it's a good horse?" And he's like, "I think it's better than your normal horse." And she's like, "Okay, let's race. If you beat Dove and me, then I'll ride this horse." And he's like, "Okay." So he gets on the horse and they start racing, and immediately, not immediately, but pretty quickly, he pulls ahead of Dove. He's going, but they're kind of going towards like a cliff. And no, the horse turns around. Behind them is the cliff towards the ocean, and they're running in like the opposite direction. And then halfway through the race, the horse is just like, "Fuck it, I want the ocean, please," because she hears like the crash of the waves, and you get the sense that the pull of the ocean is just so enticing to the Kapalishka. They just want to go home. And so the horse literally just turns around and starts running to the cliff, and he's like, "Oh God." Oh, like, he's like trying to calm her down. He's using all of his tricks to try get her to chill. And at the last minute, like right before they go over the cliff, he finally like jumps off the horse and lets her go. And she manages to dodge the rocks and go off. And so Puck comes back and goes, and he's like, "You won. Congrats. Good job."
Another moment I love is that he doesn't get bitchy about it. He just is very straightforwardly like, "You won. That's fair. It's interesting that this horse ran into the water," but he doesn't get like, "Oh man, I was wrong about it" or anything. And it
Or
tells you something about his character.
or if that horse hadn't like turned around and run into the
Yeah.
ocean, you would have been smoked. Like, he doesn't
There's
care.
a
He's
lack
like,
of ego to it that's really
yes.
nice.
Also, someone mentioned, Zeta says, the ocean says shh, shh, which is just something that regularly gets brought up in the audiobook that is just so magical. And the narrators match each other's intonation. These two narrators have worked together before. I know they have, because they were in Flippin' Ember in the Ashes.
This is such a better book than that, you guys.
Oh my God.
That book is like all the things I disliked about this book in terms of being overwrought. It's interesting how much better some authors are than others.
Yeah, and
I said it.
It's true. But the way they narrate that of the ocean, they matched each other. Like, you can tell some thought it was so good. Mwah. I love it. But anyway, so she decides to race Dove, and there's this big like ceremony night where like there's a like the fair, the Scorpio like festival, and there's a procession where you have to go and announce your like racing and say who your horse is. And once that happens, you can't change horses anymore. And at this point, Sean has a meeting with Benjamin Malvern, where Malvern's like, "Okay, tell me about the three horses we have. Which one's the fastest? Which one's the most dependable?" Because what you find out is every year, Benjamin Malvern asks Sean about who's the safest horse. And that's the one that he puts his son Mutt on because he doesn't want Mutt to die. So he puts her on the safest one, and it's this horse named Madonna. And so Malvern's like, okay, you'll ride Core. One second, guys. Excuse me. You'll ride Core.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get to my screen fast enough, guys. That was gross. Go ahead.
And then Mutt will ride Idana. And then if you want to let that other one go, you can. And then, you know, he met with what's her face to see if she'd take it, and she didn't because the horse jumped off a cliff. So you get to the night of the festival, and it's really interesting because there is this kind of like paganism, because there is Christianity here.
So actually, one of the ways this showed up earlier was the Malvern stables. He says, like, we call them the Malvern stables, but they were here before him. You get a sense for like this grotto, and they have all these carvings on them that, like, again, are like these old Celtic carvings of horses and men and ocean. Again, wonderful world building detail. And at one other point, it's mentioned that like one of the families, like, they're not Christian, they kind of follow the old pagan ways of the island. And I thought that was really great. And the thing about this stone that they're going to all go and mark their blood on is they mentioned at one point that they used to just kill a person, the rider who wouldn't go on the races or something like that, which is like such a great bloody detail. I just really liked that.
Oh, it's so good. But there's also like a woman in a Capelish mare costume, just like half woman, half horse, just walking around, and she's the mare goddess, and she's like, her voice is, and at one point Sean's trying to figure out who the fuck is in that costume, and because she says like, I'm gonna give you another wish, because years ago she hands out a seashell, and whoever gets the seashell gets to make a wish, and he got one previously, and she said, I'm gonna give you another wish, Sean Kendrick, decide what you want. And he is so off put by this interaction because it feels so magical. He's like, I just need to find out who it is, whoever, and then that'll take the mysticism out. While he's off doing that and trying to have that experience, Puck is trying to find Gabe because she's really pissed that Gabe did not tell her that they were going to lose their house. Like, why wouldn't he have said anything? And she hasn't been able to find him because he has not been coming home since the night he told them he was leaving. And he just like, either it's coming home super, super late or just isn't coming home, and she can't tell. So she's trying to find him, and she does. And she has this really like stilted interaction with him where he basically like, he's like, why would I have told you guys? What could you have done about it? You know, the two, Finn and Puck, go work at these three sisters. It's called Fathom and Sons, even though there's no sons and no one's named Fathom. They're the Maud sisters. And like the head one's Dory Maud. And they go there and they'll make teapots for them to sell in their catalogs, and they'll get some money from that. But like Finn and Puck aren't money makers, you know? And he was like, why would I have told you guys? And so they have this like interaction that for Puck is just very unsatisfying. And she, at one point, and I felt this to my core, this book does women existing in a space that people think of as just for men super well, in a way that didn't feel like, ooh, men suck. You know, it just felt like, this is the life that these people lead. But at one point he calls her hysterical, and she was like, I didn't think I was being hysterical.
That was a great note. Yeah, that like people just call her that sometimes, and she's like, no, I'm not. And so later she has to keep her calm because she's like, I don't want to be called hysterical, which again is just like a little detail that I think a lot of women.
I've been there. Like, I felt that to my core of being like, I was not hysterical. And then later having to check myself to make sure I was as calm, cool, and collected as possible so people wouldn't think I was hysterical, especially like, I'm a director. And not only am I a director, but I've been one since I was like in my job since I was like 27, which is kind of young, especially when a bunch of other people were like that I was in charge of were older than me. And
which movies?
What?
You said you were a director. Which movies have you directed?
Like management, like middle management position. But anyway, and so like I feel that so hard. But anyway, and it was just a great scene. I really liked it. There was this guy who you could tell was into Puck. who she thought was nice, and she kept describing his hands as square, but like they were nice hands, and his face was also kind of square. It was very cute. But anyway, she kind of like fucks off. So she doesn't have to walk through. Like, she's so upset, she doesn't want to have to walk through and have people see how upset she is. So she kind of goes out the back. And then it comes to like the declaration ceremony, where again, there's that rock Will was talking about. And they just like drop some goat's blood on it instead of, slitting a man's throat over the rock. Modernizing.
Lame and not at all hardcore. I just want to say that.
But yeah, and they have all the writers who have to come up and announce who they're writing. And when Malvern comes up, he says he's not writing Idana, he's writing Skarder, who is the white and black piebald mare who was the fucking like dog eater from earlier.
From the beginning of the mayor's introduction, like, okay, how is Puck gonna write her? Is Core gonna have a problem, and Sean is gonna write her? And like, I was like, oh, this is a good use for her, because I'd been wondering if like at the last minute Puck was gonna shift from Dove to the piebald, and it's not what happens, which I thought was like, oh, okay, that's a smart use of it.
And so it gets up to the point where Puck is going to ride. And at this point, you really haven't gotten a lot of interaction outside of people being like, this is really dangerous, Puck, don't do this. Like Peggy, the butcher's wife, comes, I forgot her last name, but comes to her like the morning after she announces that she's going to ride, and was like, you shouldn't do this. And Puck's like, you're not going to talk me out of this, Peggy. And Peggy's like, fair enough. Okay, I will not talk you out of this. But the night, like she walks up, she's getting ready to walk up the stone so she can drop some of her blood up. And then some men from the village were like, nope, nope, nope. There has never been a woman who has ever raced this. It is the sea is the unchangeable woman. We must be on the island. The steadfastness, like you can't also be on the beach. That's too much. And she's like, I'm not trying to like do anything. I have to race, guys. And she's like, what does it matter? And they were like, no, we're not going to let you. It's never happened before. And it was such a realistic, because you buy it from this small town, a little bit of a backwater and no woman has ever raced before. She didn't even think like, I'm the first woman who raced. Like, it's not something that the book highlights. But immediately I was like, oh yeah, this would be something. Jesse highlights,
yeah, this was such a great part.
Yeah.
We have rules that should go without saying. Yeah, because they start trying to change the rules on her at the last minute and being like, oh no. And she's like, that's not in the official rules. And he's like, okay, there's rules that go without saying. And she thought that was bullshit.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a great way of doing it. Which, by the way, he's actually right in that, like, there are rules that go without saying, in terms of like, if you were cooking something and putting a recipe, you wouldn't specify like chicken eggs, you would just say eggs. But in this case, yes, it's sexist and weird, and I actually did like that scene. I thought it was very funny.
But anyway, and then like everybody's like they're literally coming because she like takes another step up the rock, and they're like, okay, we're gonna bodily take her down. And then Sean Kendrick's like, she can race, she's pretty good, I've seen her, she's fine, I vouch for her. And everybody's like, well, if Sean Kendrick said it, I guess we have to fucking let it happen.
Yeah, which was like a good moment.
I loved it. I love Sean so much, and I love how people are like, nobody knows more about racing in the Kapalishka than Sean Kendrick, so if Sean says it, we have to listen. Like, just, mwah. I love it. But anyway, so she does her thing. She, like, pricks her finger, bleeds her little blood on the rock, announces she's racing with Dove, and Peg Grattan, Grattan, that's her name, Peg Grattan, has this bird costume that apparently is symbolic for the island, and she's the person people say that they're going to race to. So she does her thing.
Sorry, really quickly, Angry Otter says how he made up rules when he was losing, basically. Yeah, that's how she thinks of it, is like when they're kids, and Gabe would just make up new rules if he started losing, and it really is like that. It was such a great metaphor for the childishness of their rules and the sexism of it. Also, a very good description of Elon Musk at the moment. Topical. I saw somebody say that it's like a kid, whenever they're losing, they should make up more rules. And that's what he's doing on Twitter.
Yep. And it's so interesting because it really felt like no one is an outright outside of Mutt, who literally has no stakes in the woman shouldn't be racing game, is like an outright asshole, but it's just like something that you feel is just embedded in this culture. And it works so much more than a lot of the like books we've read where they were like in lore, in the book lore,
Oh
there's
my god.
this
Which again, you guys
rule,
haven't read, but
and we haven't posted the video for it, but there's this weird rule, even though it's set in modern times in New York City. There's this rule that only men can inherit the power of the gods, even if the god was previously a woman god. And it's just, it feels like such a made up, non-organic to the setting rule. Like you're telling me in the past 2,000 years that never changed. And those kinds of things feel like the author being like, I'm going to make a feminist commentary for the sake of making a feminist commentary. And it feels like it's trying too hard. And it just
yeah,
makes
very
men
much so.
look like dicks.
And it's so annoying, and it doesn't, again, it's just, you can feel it deeply embedded in this insular culture that, like, again, she like probably came generations ago and she's still an outsider, and like there is like still the deep pagan beliefs, even if they've all switched to Christianity now. It feels organic, and it's so much more powerful. And one thing people have mentioned in the comments, and eventually I was going to mention too, is that this book feels so much more powerful, even though the stakes are so much lower than in a lot of the other books we've read, which are like about saving the world.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, in this book, because the stakes are so much lower, it feels so powerful. And in that way, it's like, this is not like us destroying the patriarchy. It's like just one step. And so it feels more radical in certain ways because of that.
It's so good. Anyway, so then her and Sean start training together. And you very like she kind of is like, oh, he kind of cute. But very quickly as they start getting to know each other, they like each other. They haven't said that they like each other to each other, but they just kind of have accepted the fact that they like each other. Like Sean starts thinking about like Puck's well-being. Puck like enjoys seeing him and begins to understand like who he is and picking up on some of his uh, idiosyncrasies. And it's really lovely because it's quiet and the way they court each other is like super subtle and just like through these small interaction moments. There's no fever touch. There's no
Thank
like when
God.
other, because people comment like it's a small town. People have seen that Puck and Puck and Sean are hanging out, and when people comment on it, she's not like, oh, I could never like him. What are you talking? You know, like that kind of reaction. There's literally a point where she's like, oh, I guess I do kind of have like some. It's
Again,
just,
it's so much less childish than a lot of the books we've read in terms of like, remember stupid Elias and his like overactive libido in that book that was also narrated by these, called Ember in the Ashes.
mhm,
And that was like so annoying all the time and
mhm.
childish and juvenile. And in this book, it's not like that. They're just
Yep.
much more straightforward, and it's sweet.
Valerie says no needless angst, and then Miss Allie No says, and everyone in town immediately starts shipping. Immediately. The only one who's kind of cautious, what I think it was Peggy Grattan, where she said, like, you know, you're trying to be like one of the guys. Like you have too much similarities.
Yeah, which was a very, again, an interesting little feminism thing of
Yeah,
like, you can fit into that culture, but they're gonna see you differently.
differently.
And then also she had a great moment where she was like, "Oh, I know the, racers are hot and cool, but they love the sea more than you." And then Puck is like, "Oh, that's not a problem. He doesn't love the sea. He loves his horses."
Yeah. Um, and then Zeta said, I love when Dory and Holly tell them separately to be good to each other, and they're both just like, wait, what? And then like, but after they like have their I like, it's just so good. It's so Peg said to Sean, those races or to Puck, those races are a jealous lover, or it might have been to Sean, I don't remember, but it's such a good comment that like the people who race are hard to love. um but in this case, they both race. So
Well,
it's
the
like,
thing about it is that he isn't racing because he loves the race. He loves his horse, and that's why he's racing, which is
yeah,
he's not chasing that high. He's building a relationship over
yeah.
time,
and
which is
and for
different.
him the race is very like a bit functional. Like he enjoys it and he enjoys the like high of it, but it's not like a make or break. Like he's won, I we haven't mentioned this, he's won 4 times at this point.
Yeah, and he doesn't like think about it or anything like that. It's just like, okay, I get to do the thing.
So for him
And
the
then
the race has very low stakes initially.
Angry Otter says that's actually pretty accurate for an insular environment. Every small town is full of shipbuilders. I like
Yep.
that term.
But anyway, so their romance is super cute. It unfolds really nicely. There's a point as the race is coming closer where she invites him over for dinner, and he's like, I shouldn't. I have so much to do. Because not only is he preparing for the race, but he still has his job at the Malvern. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's this really terrible scene.
Actually,
Oh,
have we mentioned, and maybe we did, and I didn't remember, but like one of the stake raisings is that he told Melbourne, like, hey,
I was getting there, but yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
okay. No. He tells Melbourne, like, hey, if you want me to keep working for you, I want to buy Core. And he's never, and Melbourne has always been like, no. And he's like, okay, I quit. And it's such a great thing because this is the thing that really makes him anxious. And this is his real fear, is not running in the race, but losing Core. And so it's a moment where what I liked about it is that it's almost not a typically masculine fight for him to have of like, I'm going to be tough and like I'm worried about knife and death. It's like, no, I'm really worried about losing this part of my life that I love. And I really liked how that was the thing he had to confront, not like the monster.
It was so good. But the other thing that happens earlier with Mutt Malvern is there is a cult named Fundamental. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, it sucks. I don't need to mention this scene, but it's such a good scene. Where there's this cult named Fundamental who is part Kapalishka, so super loves swimming. And uh, Sean has taken Fundamental out to exercise him in the water, and he has this guy named Daly, who's one of the people, stable hands, watching the water of this cove because they're in a cove which is pretty protected, but there is one entrance into the rest of the ocean that a Capel could come through and try eat Fundamental. But Daly is supposed to be watching, and this happens pretty early on. It's right after the scene where Puck and Dove nearly get eaten by the Kapalishka on the beach. And so Sean's a little distracted, but he's relying on Daly. And Mutt tells Daly to go away and he's going to watch. And he specifically sees a Kapalishka come into the cove and doesn't say anything. At the last minute, Daly realizes what's happening, and Sean does too, because he sees the way that water dips as something really big is coming underneath. But it's too late, and it literally like clamps down on Fundamental's neck. And immediately Sean dives in to try save Fundamental. And it's just such a shitty scene because he'd been talking about earlier about how he watched Fundamental be born. He's one of the best, like brightest horses that they have. Like he's such a like beauty. And then he just gets killed by this Kapalishka because Mutt Malvern was hoping it would piss off Benjamin Malvern enough to fire him. And there's this great moment where you realize that Benjamin Malvern knows who his son is because he hears the report from Daly and he hears Mutt's report, and he goes to Sean and says, you tell me what actually happened. And Sean's like, oh shit, I can't talk against your son. And Benjamin goes, no, that's all I needed to hear. Because he said, why did you dive in the water to try save Fundamental? And he was like, of course I would. Why wouldn't I? I watched that horse being born. And it's a testament to how much Benjamin, as much as he's a dick, trusts Sean, that he immediately was like, oh yeah, no.
I actually kind of liked Benjamin as a character. Like he's a bastard, but there is a sense to him being kind of a real person in that like he is kind of reasonable. He does want his son to live. Like as much as he may be kind of shitty to his son at times, he makes sure that he's getting on the least dangerous horse and he lets him ride. And like he does feel like a small town tyrant, but like kind of a realistic person. And I did like that about him. I thought he was a little bit more nuanced than Mutt.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, so I have to explain something because this is kind of important. Towards like the I would say the beginning of the last third, when Sean says, "I'm quitting if you don't let me have core," and he does quit. Like for a day, he's quit, and immediately, Mutt takes Core out to the beach because he's never been
Oh
able to
yeah.
ride Core, but because now that Sean doesn't work there anymore. And so he takes Core out to the beach. And the way Mutt rides is he uses a lot of these things that annoy the Kapalishka to control them, like an iron breastplate, and they hate iron. It's got barbs on it. He puts bells on his hooves.
Well,
And
and specifically, Core hates it because Core
Core
doesn't
hates it.
needs like Sean is like, there's some kind of works with and some it doesn't, and you need to gauge how much. Again, there's a lot of really nice small details that show that Sean knows what's up with these horses. It's not just an informed ability like sometimes we've read in these books.
Yeah. But yeah, so he gets up on Core, and then there's another kid, like I think the guy's name was David, but there's this other guy helping him who's holding the front lead of Core. And Sean is on the beach. Puck has come down to see this, but she sees Sean kind of standing away from everything. And she kind of goes to him and is like, "Are you okay?" And he's like he's kind of not watching, but watching at the same time. And of course, Core attacks someone and like literally takes a chunk out of the neck of the guy who was in front, and Sean could see it happening and starts like calling against it because Core kept just butting his nose against this guy's shoulder, and the guy thought it was like a normal horse. David Prince, woo, that's this guy's name. David just thinks it's like Core being a horse, and this is one of those moments where you see you can't let you can't treat them like a normal horse. And David
Even
Prince's mistake.
Core, who is like the most trained in terms of like how we see him from Sean's point of view, like he just I love imagining him too, just like snapping. There's a part where he's riding the piebald at the beginning, and it's described as almost like serpentine and how it runs and moves, and you're like, oh, this really is just death incarnate.
Yep.
Or the sea.
And David Prince makes the mistake of treating Core like a horse and ends up losing his life for it. And so Sean like calls and is like, "Mike, like, or David, like, back away." And David doesn't, and Core just takes a chunk out of his neck, and Puck and Sean like run, like and Sean immediately, like, Mutt gets like tossed off. Sean takes off his jacket, takes off his shirt, and kind of balls it up and puts it in Core's nose to get Core to calm down, and immediately just starts trying to take off all of this shit that Mutt had put on him. And then Puck goes down to David Prince and is holding his hand, and David's like trying to talk, and she's like, no, it's okay, help is coming, it's fine. And at one point, Sean asks for her help, and she realizes that David Prince is no longer holding her hand, she's holding his.
And that's how it says it in the book, and it's such a great moment. It's one of those writerly things that, like, somebody said once about great writing is it's like a moment you felt but seen from a view you haven't, or it articulates something you've always felt. And like that was the thing, is it's like it's a good bit of like wordplay, but it really hits you at that moment. I actually just love that scene where she's holding onto his hand and you can feel her panic and just anxiety just all rolling in on her at this moment as this man is dying.
Oh, it's so good. Anyway, and then Sean asks for her help to like hold Core's lead, and she holds it, and she realizes that Sean is trusting her in this moment to be close to Core, because he is literally like underneath Core, taking off all of these bells, taking off everything. But she realizes Core calmed down because it was the smell of Sean. Like there is something there with like the presence of them, and also it's a shirtless scene, and she's not like, "Wow, look how rugged and handsome he is."
Yes,
like
that was so good.
it doesn't even like occur to her. Like it's just the scene is just so intense, and like in other lesser quality books, that would have been something that got mentioned a minute after she realized a dude died. And she's kind of caught because she's like super like in awe of Sean's ability to calm this horse down, but she's also like terrified that this guy has died, and she feels guilty, like if she had kept holding his hand maybe he wouldn't have. And it's just a fantastic scene, and it also puts into perspective that like even a tame Kapalishka, you have to, as someone else, Miss Allie Snow said, you can't let your guard down for a minute, and you absolutely cannot. And it's a great scene, and it is after this point where Sean asks her if she wants to ride Core. And it's at this point that Mutt Malvern is like, okay, or not Mutt, Benjamin Malvern's like, I'll let you if you win the race and you can pay me 200 coins. I will let you buy Core. And he asks her if she wants to ride. And he was like, obviously with me, I'm not going to put you up on this horse by yourself. And she's like, kind of terrified. And he's like, he's not sure if she's going to say yes. And then she's like, yeah, no, I'm fucking going to do it. And he's like, yeah, Angry Otter said, I'm not going to go into it, but there's a scene where she goes to confession.
That was so funny. That was so funny.
It's great. Read the
it's
book,
a great
guys.
characterizing moment too for the setting, in that like, yeah, there is this kind of Catholicism to them that like, and Puck isn't like a religious character, but like she goes to church and she needs to say a confession, and then she needs him to give her some Hail Marys to say, and then she'll feel better.
Even though she hasn't done anything bad. Like there's literally a part, it's so funny. Zeta said, I've sinned, I swear. And the priest's like, okay, here's 2 Hail Marys and a Columba. Like, get the fuck out. It's so great. There's also a nice follow-up scene where Finn was like, did the priest make you do some stuff? You've been bad lately. And she was like, I was trying to tell him.
That was great.
It's so great. But anyway, and so the next morning, I think it was literally like the next morning, like later that day.
Yeah, it's close by.
She goes to ride Core, and it is a super like the shipper in me was like, oh yes, I love this, because there's a point where like it's really loud, and he has to like talk into her ear, and you know, like it's so great. Like, and the book doesn't focus on those moments.
Now it's earned. By now it's earned is the thing. This is like in the last third of the book. And so, and it's not like fever touch. It's just like, oh, she remembered his hand. And like, yeah. And it really, and there actually is this sense of like intimacy about the scene anyway, so that it doesn't feel out of place. One of the things I said about Uprooted is that like by the end, you're like, she took his hand. And like that has this quality already. Which is really good. But then after this part, they've basically decided that like they're going to kind of work together in the race, in that Sean is going to be on one side of her. She's going to basically be able to run in the sea more than the other Kapelishka, and he'll be on the other side of her, protecting her with the other one. Oh, that's the other thing, is that Cole is into Dove.
Yes.
Who is her?
Oh my god, it was the best. I loved it. And he's like prancing and stuff, and he's like, yo, my guy, stop.
Because he's like, sometimes they want to mate with them and sometimes they want to eat them, like normal horses. So yeah,
Core likes Dove, and I love that. I can ship. Continue. You were.
Yeah, no. So they're at this point, they decided they're gonna go. There's a really great scene where her and Puck and Finn are like eating like outside at night, and they're having a picnic, and then they just see this like black death's head come out of the dark. Actually, I think they hear it. That's the image I really remember.
Towards the afternoon, like the sun is going down. Finn has been smelling rain and it's been like, yeah, storm is coming. And the thing is, storms are not great because while it's wet, the Kapelish are like, land is a good place to be. Heckin' good times. And they're sitting there and they're eating like a cake or something. And it's this really like chill scene. She's just worked out Dove. Dove is calming down, eating some hay. And her and Finn are just having like a regular old chit chat. And then they hear something. And like, because Dove's ears prick, and there's this quiet moment. And then they hear the noise again. And then they hear like a cry. And they're like, oh shit, it's a Kapelishka. And then they see, and there's this beautiful way where like the Kapelishka are sometimes serpenty and less horse-like, and other times more horse-like, and this long black face with these long ears and noses that's basically slits, just turns around and is pushing against the gate that is keeping it out. And it's not.
Well, the Kapelishka have like those square, creepy goat eyes, not like normal horse eyes. So that's also how I imagined it.
Oh God, and it's just so terrifying because like Dove is still, and they're all like, we have to be really still. We have to be super still, and like you're just like captivated, and then all of a sudden they hear another noise, like a crying, and like at first she thinks it's another Kapalishka come to like fuck him up, and then she realizes, oh no, it's Puffin. It's Finn's like barn cat that he likes, and this is the noise the cat makes to let Finn know. It's like you guys have heard my pumpkin when she wants my attention and she makes that like
Cats
baby.
specifically mimic baby noises to get humans' attention.
Yes.
Like that's why they sound so pitiful and plaintive sometimes.
And it's that noise, like, and so I'm just sitting there thinking of my pumpkin being like, "Mom, I want your attention," and I'm like, "Oh no!" And then you see Puffin coming up, like completely unaware of what's happening, and then the Kapalishka's attention goes from the three of them to the cat, and you're like, "Oh God, no, murdered me!" And then the cat sees the Kapalishka and just starts running, which is the worst thing to do because Kapalishka like a chase, and the Kapalishka just starts like bolting after it, and then like as they like clear vision, they hear the yowl of Puffin, and Finn is just inconsolable because it's his second kitty, and she's like, oh God, we have to get inside, we have to bring Dove inside, and they're like trying to get out of the little fenced area, and you're just like, no, Puffin. And as a reader I was like, if Puffin's dead, I'm done, because you know we care more about cats.
In fiction, animals are more important than humans. Again, I love Finn, but if Finn had died, it wouldn't have been as traumatic as if the cat had died.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how it is for some reason.
And so as they're trying to get into the house, Gabe and Tommy Falk show up, and they've got Tommy's car, and they had realized that a bunch of Capel were coming up out of the ocean. Like everyone on the island is kind of like on lockdown because it's dangerous weather. Like it like storms equal Capel attacks. And so they came to get them because their house is not the sturdiest. And they literally have like hold Dove's reins outside the car so that they can like trot off, and they go to Peggy and Thomas Grattan's house, or Tommy Grattan's house, and it's Gabe, it's oh no, it was Bish. I forgot what Peggy and
I forget
Tommy's
all
son.
of them. Yeah, Tommy, I only remember because he has a scene right before like the end, and like yeah, so they get them and they bring Dove and they go back to Peggy's house, which is the butcher's, and this is where, again, one of my theories is that Gabe and Peggy were having an affair, because there's this part where Puck mentions that like Gabe is so much happier over there, and must have been where he was the whole time, and then there's a part where he's talking in Peggy's ear while everybody else is off somewhere else. And that to me, I thought was very suspicious. I also thought him and Tommy might be gay, because that also would make sense for why he was over there all the time. And he seems so much happier. But
I took it as it was a happy, complete household. It was a mom, a dad, Beach was there. And it was just a place where he could avoid the sadness and depressive nature of his life.
It's such a shitty move on his part. Like,
it is, but that happens. Like I for me, it felt like he was depressed. He wasn't handling the situation, and he was escaping it. Like people who just play video games to avoid dealing with the things in their life that they don't want to deal with. Like he just.
Why would you call me out in the middle of a podcast? You know I don't edit these.
I wasn't calling you out. Okay. I was going to say fan fiction, but I thought that would be a call out. So
actually, I did back when I was more depressed all the time. I would use video games to kind of like as a
and so him going to, because it's also said that he goes to Tommy Falk's house as well. Like he would just hang out with his friends in their complete homes with their loving parents, and go hang out there. So that's what I took it as.
You know what I mean?
Now, Angry Otter also picked up on some Peggy Gabe vibes. I didn't. Maybe it was there. Go ahead and like you read it, guys. Let me know. So
join the discourse.
Join the discourse. Angry Otter said, I saw the family aspect, but I also am with Will on the Peg affair thing. And then Pearl says it could have been Gabe was not happy with becoming a surrogate parent of his household, which is what I took for it. And then I didn't get any scandal vibes. He was just happier there.
Think about
we're split.
Again, literature is sometimes doing things underneath the surface that you have to bear in mind.
It is? Oh my God, William! Who knew?
I know. Hey, I'm smart. What can I say? This whole hold on, because someone said. Oh, okay. So Celia said on the Discord, typing this here for the discussion about Gabe later on. Leaving your family behind is such a difficult thing and so nuanced as well. And I do think that Stiefvater set it up right. I do feel like Gabe has issues leaving, but more in a way that he has already closed off his heart to that part of him as self-preservation. I come from a small town as well and left to live abroad for 3 years. I returned to my small town to take care of my sister, and I hate being here. I love my family, but there's just less of me to love them. I can't be myself here the same way Gabe can't heal. He can't be fully committed to be there for his family, so I finally really get his character motivation. This is actually also the scene where Puck and Gabe finally have a talk about like why he's leaving, and it does make it's interesting because I kind of thought this was going to happen, and then the author actually does it, which is nice, which is that like Gabe starts from a position of like what a bastard, and then you understand him, and Puck understands him more as like, okay, he's making a decision that's kind of shitty at times, but he is not necessarily a shitty person for doing it. And like, again, him needing to leave, I feel like is a little too ambiguous. I think, again, there might be other reasons that we could consider that why he would leave, but, um, oh, well, again, the priest said Gabe had his reasons. That's what I'm saying.
But
And it was consensually, if he was confessing actual sin to the priest, adultery is a sin. Seems like a breadcrumb to me.
But the priest didn't say he confessed sins. He just said he had his reasons.
Well, he can't say he's a priest. You never watched a soap opera where somebody has cheated and had a kid out of wedlock, and they tell the priest, and then the priest can't tell someone.
As Jesse says, also selfishness is a sin, especially amongst the Catholics. So it's the jury is split. We don't have an actual decision. I'm not going to spend more time arguing over whether or not Gabe had an affair with Peggy Grattan. Okay,
we're just all right, fine. We're just gonna move.
He might have. I don't think so. Some people.
It's like one of the great literary mysteries. Like, how do you pronounce Anna Karenina?
Yes. Anyway, what are we? Oh, yes.
We should probably finish up.
Yes. So, Sean, she invites Sean to dinner at her house, and it's super fucking cute. He shows up with bread, and she's like, "Oh my god." When she opens the door, she's like, "Oh god, it looks like he's courting," but she's like, I guess so. Like, it's fine. And it's just so cute because you get to see Sean. It's great. I love it. Gabe, after this point, starts coming into their life more. Like, Gabe comes over with Tommy Falk and brings a chicken. They have dinner. Sean shows up. It's super cute. Which sets up the next scene where Sean had told her, you need to bring Dove down to the beach tomorrow because it'll be your last day you can practice on the beach, and you need Dove needs to get a bit used to having the other Capples around. She tried once before to go down onto the beach earlier in the book, but the guys were dicks, and their Capples were trying to like get at Dove, and so they like fucked off, and she hasn't been back down on the beach with Dove since. And he tells her, we should do that tomorrow so you can get that practice, because the next day, which is the day before the race, the beach is closed. Nobody's allowed to go out. And she's like, okay, I can do that. And then the next morning, she's getting ready to go down. And he was like, no, bring Dove back. Like, you absolutely cannot bring her out. The sand is really like, it's stormy. The sand is really chaotic. Like, it's a bad day. You will fuck shit up. And then she goes, okay, I'll put Dove behind Dory Maud's stall, but is Tommy Falk down there? Like, I can see Tommy not knowing and deciding to go down. And he was like, I'll go find him. And she's like, no, I'll go with you. So they go down together and they find Tommy Falk. And it is just such an affecting scene because you just had like the night before him throwing a chicken around the living room with Gabe. And it's the way they stumble upon his death is so like the way she wrote it is so atmospheric and sad and beautiful, where like his Capel is just like standing there and there's like 4 dead bodies in a row, and Sean comes up and sees Puck just crouched next to one of the bodies, not looking at it but kind of looking at the sand in between her, and it's Tommy. And the next day, which is the day before the race, ends up being Tommy's funeral. And it is so affecting because Tommy's family, the Falks, keep to the old religion, like the old ways. So it's not a bury you in the ground funeral, it's a funeral pyre.
And the
and
horse is Sean brings him
released.
back to the sea, right? And he's released. And like that was really cool. And then there's a part where Tommy's father talks to Puck about like, I understand you're doing this, but it's not right. This is a religious thing. This isn't just about money. This is
Or
about us and the
horses.
horses and the sea. And again, it was such a great world building detail, and it also brings such weight to the races that like this isn't just a random thing for them. There is meaning in these races for these people who live on this like very windswept, rocky, one assumes hard life.
Yep. And it's beautiful because he makes the point, like, if you just race with a normal horse and you win, it makes all of this, like my son dying, instead of it being for this big religious, like, mythical thing, he just died because of a race that happens to have some carnivorous horses. And it's sad, and she knows that his dad's not trying to be like a dick or anything, but like it's just such a great scene. Afterwards, Sean is trying to look for her because he comes to the funeral and he has stuff that he has to do. This guy's so busy, and he's like, I should leave, but he's like, I can't come here knowing that Puck was here and not see her. And it's not like he's like, I must see her. He's just like, I gotta go find her. And it's just sweet. And he's asking around for her. And then eventually he's like, okay, if I was Puck, where would I be? And he goes up to the like this like top of a sand dune, like cliff thingy, and she's sitting there, and they end up like just sitting and talking about everything, the race, the things that have happened. You know, he had told her the day before, or like a couple days ago, that she had an actual chance because the rest of the Capels are going to try to get back into the ocean or fight with each other, and if Dove just goes straight, she has a legitimate chance to win. And while she was kind of disbelieving at first and then happy, she also knows that if she wins, that means Sean can't buy core. And so it's this bittersweet moment where they both need this money for important, high-stake things for them personally, but they both can't win. And then the day of the beach, he said, I don't know what to wish for, because that the mare goddess gave him that wish. And she said, wish for happiness. And he's like, that's kind of ephemeral on this island. And she's like, wish for it, we both win, and we rule as king and queen of the Scorpio races, and you get core and go live in your house, and I have Dove and keep my house, and like we get to see each other. And they kiss, and it's so beautiful and sweet, and it's such a touching moment, and he wishes just for the things he needs. And it's such a simple baby of a wish, you know?
It's so cute.
It's so cute, and it's such a gorgeous scene for the two of them. And then the next day is race day, and it's super stressful. People are everywhere. I forgot to mention, there's this guy named George Hawley, who's an American. I love him. I like his character. He has a weird side plot where him and Annie Maud like had sex, and he kind of wants to marry her, and the Maud sisters are like, be nice to him, Puck. It's super, and he's also really nice to Finn, which is what won me over to George Hawley.
And Finn and him kind of become friends despite him being like a rich California person. And it gets good dividends in terms of Finn's character and understanding him more. But like he actually isn't necessary to this recap.
No,
but he's a good character. No. And also I liked the way the voice actor did an American accent.
It was very strange. But anyway, so the day of the race comes, she's going down with Dove. People are like pressing up against her, and like Dove's getting really spooked, and she's like, I cannot have people like getting Dove so overworked that she doesn't run correctly. And so Sean comes out and is like helping her get people to back off. And she's like, can you take Dove down for me? Because he tells her where to go get her colors, which is on the beach. And before she leaves, oh God, it's so fucking cute. I'm such shipper trash. He goes, wait a second. And he takes her hand and he puts this little like tie of red string on it, and he kisses her wrist.
I'm gonna keep the camera on Maria because her reaction is my reaction, but more effusive.
Oh my God, it's so good. And then she was like, what's that? And he was like, for luck. And then he goes to like go away, and then she says, Sean,
in this crowd of people,
like there are people all over, like just, and like there was reporters who were also like taking pictures and being annoying and freaking her out. And so he goes to like leave, and she goes, Sean, and she like grabs his face and kisses him, and there's like whoops and hollerings and crowding, and I'm like, fuck yeah, this me. I'm like, yeah, I bet on that. And it's just so cute. And she's like, for luck as well. And then they like separate, and like he gets Dove, like, because people just give him like wide space. Nobody's fucking crowding him when he has Dove. And it's so cute. And I hit it. So Angry Otter. Ahoy, shippers. Holly is the extrovert that adopts the introvert 100%. Such shipping feels. It's so ship. Oh God, I fucking loved this. Anyway, she goes to get her colors, and they're on the beach with this little stall with a bunch of different colors, and they're like, "There's none left for you," even though they have a giant stack. And she's like, "Really, guys? You're not going to give me colors?" And they just start talking to each other about the weather and like garbage things, and they just ignore her. And then she starts walking away, like kind of pissed. And Gabe comes and is like, "They won't give you colors." And he was like, "That's fucked up." Because earlier that day, like that morning, Gabe was like, "Don't do this. Please don't race." And she was like, "I have to do this." And then she says to him, "Don't leave." And he's like, "I have to." And she's like, "Well, there you go, buddy." And it's this great moment because somebody said earlier, one of the best things in this book is her coming to terms with the fact that Gabe has to do what is best for his own life, and that his ability to lead a life that makes him happy might mean that it separates them, and her coming to terms with that. And so like they both look at each other and are like, we both don't want the other to do this thing that we both feel we have to do. And it's a great moment at the start. But anyway, he's and he was like, "How dare they not give you colors? I'll go talk to them." And they won't. So she's getting ready before the race, and Peggy Bratton comes, and she's got her like Scorpio race bird costume, like when she was the bird lady cape, and she's taken the headpiece off, and she gives it to
Dove?
Puck to put on Dove to use as her colors, because she didn't have colors otherwise. And it's this really nice moment because throughout the scene, like the book started with Peggy Grattan being like, nah, don't race, this is dumb, to Peggy Grattan being like, do it, show them what you're made of, and don't let anyone help you with your horse or you're like setting up everything the day of the race. And there's a moment where she thinks about it earlier when she asks Sean to take Dove down, and she's like, Sean doesn't count. And it's just so cute. Anyway, and then the race happens. And the race as a scene, I'm not going to go into too much detail because it is fantastic. You should just read it.
Nerve-wracking. It is fantastic and nerve-wracking. And it's man, there was so much tension building towards it. And the thing is, the whole book has been building toward it and ratcheting up the tension and showing just how dangerous the Kappa Ishka are, and the weight of what's gonna happen afterwards in terms of what it means for the characters. And so what happens essentially is that she wins, and
there
Sean,
was this, they managed to stick to their plan, besides even though they couldn't talk to each other. But Mutt Malvern at the start of the race, before it starts, basically tells Sean, "I know what you care about." And he realizes Mutt's gonna go after Puck. So not only like he has to race, he has to like win, but he also has to keep Puck alive. And during the race, there's this point where Puck and Sean are finally next to each other after like a bunch of like shit happening. Literally, a guy's capel just goes into the ocean and then bites a chunk of his cheek off. Like it's gruesome. But anyway, they're finally next to each other, and Mutt Malvern, who's in third place, drops back to start fucking with them, and to try get at Puck, but Sean uses Core to separate them and basically tells her, "Fucking go." She ends up winning. It's fantastic. But Mutt has decided he was never in this to win. He's just going to fuck up Sean. He literally like cuts his Kapalishka to make her really angry, to attack Core and Sean. And then you get left with that as a scene. Puck wins, and people are like, "Woohoo, Puck, oh my God, what a great thing, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Where the fuck is all the other racers come?" And she doesn't see Core and Sean. And she's like, "Where the fuck are they?"
Well, and what had happened is the last that we'd heard of Sean is that he had fallen off of Core. And he's like, "This is exactly what happened to my father. If I roll, maybe I can not get ground into a paste by all the horses going by." And then, so she sees him, and
he runs back down the beach.
Yeah, and she sees him, and Core standing over him. And the thing is, Core had stopped and saved him. And this moment is just it was such an unexpected moment for me in that like this is not what I expected to happen at all. But it's a moment where you realize that Core loves him as much as he loves Core, that he wasn't gonna run. He doesn't care. He needed to protect Sean. And I loved it so much.
And he also, because Core also could have just bolted into the ocean, like peace him out, you know, but he stays. And there's this moment as she comes up to him and she sees what she originally thought was just like a reflection, but it's Sean bloody under it, like kind of at the lip of the water. And she realizes in that moment that this is the thing that she cannot stand, because earlier when Gabe was like, I cannot stand being here. I can't handle it. She was like, you can handle anything if you put your mind to it. And then she sees Sean and she thinks he's dead. And she realizes in that moment, she cannot handle if he is dead. That is the thing, that is her line in the sand. And he ends up being alive. And as he comes to, he kind of looks and he goes, Core stayed. I would have died if he hadn't stayed. But then they both realize Core's leg is broken and Core will never race again. And it's the book finishes really quickly, but I want to comment on something that I think is very, very, very significant, which is Pearl says, I felt Scarter was a little underutilized in that scene. Scarter was not adequately, like, she was built up to so much. Yes, the white piebald that Mutt raced on. And it was built up so much, and it felt like such a quick, and like, I was expecting a terrifying moment with her by the end. And it wasn't. It was like, Mutt kind of like almost slits her throat. And then she like panics into them. You know, it wasn't her being like this vicious thing that
I wanted to see her rip something apart. Yeah,
exactly. And so I do agree. It felt like such a weird, like underutilization.
Like a Chekhov's gun that didn't quite go off.
Exactly.
But after
she does drag Mutt into the ocean with her, so Mutt's dead. You know, sucks to suck,
Mutt. And so what happens after this is that you know, she has her money. Puck has her money, but she doesn't.
Back from winning.
They're walking back with Finn, and like she's like, you know, Finn's like, why don't we just buy Core for him? We have the money. And she's like, we don't. We only have enough money really to keep our house. And he's like, what about all this money? And he gives her a bunch of money, and she's like, where did you get this? And he's like, the odds on you are 1 to 45. And you realize that he had like betted
their last of their money.
Yeah, like the little bit in the jar, and they have enough money now, and it's such a great like. Finn came through. Like it's like that is a Chekhov's gun that went off.
And it's a nice callback because earlier she had asked him about selling the Morris, which was the car that he loved and he worked on, and he ends up selling it so they can buy better food for Dove. And again, it's a moment where he's eating like November cakes, which are these like sticky honey cakes, and she's like, "Where did you get the money for that?" And he pulls out a wad of cash, and he's like, "I sold the Morris." And so it's this nice Chekhov's gun that goes off, and he's so proud because like. And once he puts the money back in his pocket, he starts walking ahead of her, and she's like, and now his walk had a strut to it. He was like, because he was like, Dory Maud said you were a good bet. And it's just so fucking
it's a great moment.
Cute. I love it so much. Anyway, the next day.
Yeah, we get to the last moment. Well, not the last moment. She then goes up to the rich guy, I'm already blanking on his name, and is like, I want these 3 things. And there's a sense of growth where like she interrupts him and asks for tea in the way that he had interrupted her earlier in the book. And you really get a sense for her growth as like she has come into her own now. And like she has been able to use all these things that were before she might not have had quite like the steeliness for it. But she gets Core for Sean. And then the last scene is Sean leading Core into the ocean spray because he's like, you know, they could fix his leg in California, but he's never really going to run again. And so he's like, you know, go.
He makes the comment that Core loved to race and loves the ocean. And as long as Sean could give Core one of those things, their relationship worked. But now he can't. And he can't go with him into the ocean. And
in the ocean, he'll actually be able to be kind of more mobile again because his leg will be like less of a problem. The weight will
be taken off. And George Hawley calls him an idiot for buying Core to just release him into the ocean. And it's a nice callback to him releasing Tommy Fox water horse into the ocean earlier, who just went. And you're just so sad because everything that Sean wanted depended on Core. And now he is making the choice that he thinks is the best for Kor. And like there's a part where he finally like takes the lead off of Kor, and he calls, there's a nice callback to the moment where he said, I lead Kor down the beach with just a lead, similarly to how I took him out of it. And he turns because he can't actually, like, he says into Kor's ear, find happiness, because he talks into Kor's ear and tells him what he needs to hear all the time. And he turns because he can't watch Kor go in. And he starts walking and he sees like Puck acting like she's got something in her eye. And then he hears Kor crying and keening for him, and he turns around and Kor's looking back. Oh god, I'm gonna fucking cry. He sees Kor.
Chills.
He sees Kor looking back at him and calling, like, come with me. What are you doing? And he's like, I can't go with him, even though he wants me to. And then Kor turns around and starts walking back, taking labored step after labored step. And there's a point where he says, like, the November sea was a jewel behind him, calling both of us, that he came back to me. And I was just, because you have to understand, I'm going to make an argument that this isn't the way the book should end.
Yeah, me too. But
it's not.
God,
it's what I wanted. It's what the little shitty fanfic trash, and I'm not actually a fan, but like, it's what I want. I want him to stay with Kor, and I want Kor and Dove to have babies, and I want them to live like and have a cute little life, and Kor to be happy. Like, oh my god! So
yeah, and that's how the book ends.
Though I will make the argument, the audiobook needed to not start the music damn quickly.
Three problems with this. First, in the audiobook, this dumbass music starts like towards the end, and like you're like, wait, you're first of all, your attention is now not on the words up until this point. The music doesn't quite match. It's like a little too cheerful, and so like I actually can't quite visualize the scene correctly. The other problem is that, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, the book has a very staccato feel to how chapters end and how the prose are in general, and so sliding in from the end of the book to the narration, it needed to have that sudden cut to really have the power that it really needed. And then you can talk about our other issue.
Yeah. And so Shelby says the music was so loud. It was. I struggled just to hear I was like, wait, did he say? I had to rewind it because I was like, did he say Kor walked back to him? Like,
yeah.
What? Oh my god, and I had to rewind it. But here's the thing. The book itself had the moment where you realize, because the thing that this ending does has already been done earlier, and this is what it is. It establishes to Sean that Kor loves him as much as he loves Kor, which was something he didn't believe. He knew Kor trusted him. He knew that Kor respected him, but throughout the entire book, he never presumes that Kor loves him or is that he is as important to Kor as Kor is to him.
And we as the reader don't either. Like I never got, like, I was just like, yeah, no, he's a water horse, but the idea that he loves Sean, you don't quite get.
And it is such a fantastic moment in realizing, because like the entire time you're like, yeah, no, of course Kor is just this, like, Sean always treats him like a Kapalishka. Like, he never gets too familiar. He never, despite the massive amount of love, it's like people who have wolf dogs and stuff, they often will start treating them too much like a dog, less like a wolf.
Yeah.
And that's when problems happen.
Forget the danger.
And Sean is always acutely aware that he is a Kapalishka, that this is who Kor is. Like, when Kor rips out David Prince's throat, he's like, well, Kapalishka, and so, but the moment that does this previously is when Sean realizes that Kor could have run into the ocean, but he chose to stay over him so nobody would trample him to death. And
protect him against the other horses.
And he protected him. And so you have it happening kind of twice, where I think for the actual book, because the whole idea is that the Kapalishka are this personification of the ocean. They
are the sea, yeah.
And they belong to the sea. They're
wild and beautiful
of the sea. And it's kind of like in Free Willy, where like for Willy's benefit, he's got to go back into the sea. And so again, I love the ending for my ship of heart, where in my head, the book actually ends with Core going into the ocean, but then I went and I found a fan fiction where Core
Yeah.
doesn't go into the ocean, and then everything I want the book to look like, which you would now assume is how it would actually play out, is what happens. And so that's kind of what I
It's the
wanted.
thing where, like, this is what I wanted, but sometimes books need to give you what you need and not what you want. And like
Mhm.
that's kind of the thing, is that like the other moment was so powerful and so much more unexpected than this decision of like, was he gonna go into the ocean or not?
The thing is, I went in and Pearl said this as well. I actually thought Core was going to walk into the sea at the end, and that the book and that would be the end of the book. Didn't expect Core to return to land, and I didn't either. It was actually very surprising. I went into the
Mhm.
ending being like, "This is how it's gonna go," um, and so
Oh,
I
also,
loved it.
Celia makes a good. I will make the same argument here as in the Discord. If Core had left, it would have drawn a great parallel with Gabe. Core needed to go because he does not belong on the
The
island.
island.
Yeah, that's true. Thematically, it would have been really interesting.
So, and then Angry Otter says instead of a parallel, it's a contrast, which is good too. And then earlier, Angry Otter had said at the race Core stays, but at the end, Sean is showing Core that he would let him go and that he's not property. And so I guess him choosing to
That
stay.
was like really the only part that gave me like horse story vibes, really. Like the rest of the book is actually not very horse story, but like this is sort of a classic horse, like, well, the horse is wild, but will it stay? Will it not? Kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So I liked the ending, but like it could have been a better ending. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like Maria said, I would have loved for the ending to be more bittersweet and then to go read the fanfic of where he stayed. That's like a
Yeah.
7,000 word or 70,000 word slow burn about just slice
Yeah.
of life stuff.
Pearl says, I wonder if the author just flipped a coin at the end for 50-50 Core goes and Core stays. And it kind of has that vibe where like you're not really sure about how it was gonna play out. I loved it. There are things like I think Gabe could have been developed a bit more. I think Mutt Malvern could have been way more humanized while also being a shit person. The will they, won't they, Annie George Holly, I think was a missed opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, Oh, Jesse says, I would have loved a Hidalgo ending where the injured horse looks back, then
Yeah.
runs to freedom. That's what I thought it was. That's what I thought we were going to
Or like he nibbles Sean's ear or something to show that he loves him, but he needs to go.
go.
Like, yeah, that's kind of the correct ending.
Or
Like
like if he would have
thematically.
turned back, went up to Sean, put his like head on his
Yeah, yeah.
shoulder, and then been like, okay, goodbye, and then went into the ocean, which I would have sobbed like a fucking baby, like yeah, but it yeah.
Yeah.
So there are things that the ending I do feel came now. Part of this, like Will said, is the chapters in this are very staccato. Some chapters are very short and lead into another very short chapter that have like a kind of
So I wanted to talk about this and never got the time because it's about A Song of Ice and Fire. Take a shot. Is that I've always made the point that in those books the chapters are short stories essentially with like a specific arc, and that you need that in a book where you're going to be away from a character for like 10 chapters before you get back to them, or which is like 10 hours of reading time or whatever. So they need to be self-contained in that way and kind of siloed a little bit. Whereas in this book ends, often the chapters will be very staccato. They'll just end and you'll immediately cut to Puck or Sean, whichever one you weren't at. And like that's actually really effective for moving the plot quickly without feeling like you're missing scenes or hurrying through the book. And again, that ending should be a staccato stop, and instead it's like blah, 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 music, which was not
yeah.
great. Yeah, and there's not a lot of falling action at all.
Yeah, which I was okay with not having the falling action. Given the way this book has been written, I was expecting it not to have falling action. I like the ending. I sobbed like a baby going to work, and I specifically tried not to cry because everybody was like, "Yo, that ending's gonna get you." So I specifically listened to the book in 20 minutes. Like once I knew I was in the last hour, I listened to it 20 minutes at a time. Walked away from it, come back, walked away from it, in the hopes that it would break the tension and the build up. And I still cried. And because that's the Angry Otter said, I mean, I was already crying before Core came back. And I was crying like as I realized they were on the beach and he was giving Core back to the ocean. I was like, like just absolute flipping tears. And I think either ending him, Core going to the ocean, him not going into the ocean would have had readers crying, especially with the way this writer writes. And there's a lack of sentimentality that lends sentimentality at the same time.
It reminds me a lot of Sabriel in terms of that and the tightness of the story, where there just isn't a lot of extraneous material.
I just finished A Portion last night, and I also cried at the end of that book, which I knew it was coming because I've read the book before, and I cried as a young girl, and it did not, like, oh God, I sobbed so hard. If any of you want to read a really satisfying, like, oh God, just please read it. It's so good. We need some A Portion love, guys. Anyway.
Really quickly, Jessie Lost Your Pen had written something longer on the Discord she wanted us to read. So if you want to do the reading, because you read better than I do.
All my thoughts summarized about the Scorpio Races is this. The story wasn't told to be a literary classic or a revolutionary manifesto. There was a story a writer was in love with and she wanted others to enjoy. The overarching achievement of the story is that while it's not perfect, it isn't any bigger than it needs to be. Instead of a massive, complex political scandal, we have a girl who will do anything to keep the remains of her family together and a boy who wants freedom from a controlling boss. These are simple things many people can connect to. Another thing I would label as an achievement is that Maggie Stiefvater understands that the characters in the story don't always fit into a binary of good or evil. Not everyone who opposes Puck is a villain. For example, Tommy's father. Even if a reader may not agree with the reasoning of every person who questions Puck's actions, sometimes the motivation behind their disagreement is something a reader can sympathize with. I feel so many stories we've been reading in book club can miss that crucial bit of nuance. I love this book. May not agree with 100% of the choices made in the writing, but it is a story I want to read again. And honestly, Jesse, I think that's a beautiful way to summarize this. I think you're 100%
Yeah, I think that's
right.
that's a great conclusion, honestly, because I agree with all of that.
This book wasn't trying to like make grand statements about something. It was telling a story.
And it's so much more powerful for that. And for just dialing, I've said before, if authors just dialed back some, especially I've mentioned like how much they like characters or how much they like the romance, it would be more powerful. And this book does that. And we're definitely reading more of her in the future, guys.
It was honestly one of my favorite. It was one of the easiest, comfortable, good reading experiences I've had for this podcast in such a long time. It was just not work. I read it very quickly and it was just delightful. Is it perfect? No. But it's doing what it's trying to do really well.
It's so much more masterful than so many of the other books we've read. Like you compare this to something like These Violent Delights, which is just a mess of a novel where the author doesn't know what they're doing. And in this book, they do know what they're doing, and she fits all those pieces really well together.
Beautifully. Angry Otter says, I'm going to buy it. Maggie S can have my money. I also am I loved it enough that I would like it on my bookshelf. Like I have books that I don't love that much on my bookshelf, but I want that guy on my bookshelf, you know?
I know. I always look very critically at your bookshelf behind you and the books you have on there.
Some of them I haven't read.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know, because you have A Song of Ice and Fire on there. So guys listening later to this in the comments, let us know, have you read any of Maggie Stiefvater's books? And are we pronouncing it even close to correct? One of Katie's friends that I met over the weekend could actually pronounce it correctly, and so I tried to remember how to do it, and I didn't, I don't think. Which other books of hers would you suggest we read next? I was looking at Shiver, which somebody said was like Monster Boyfriend adjacent, which could be good, and you know, me and Maria are both Monster Boyfriend trash. But yeah, let us know.
Yeah. This was great. Thank you guys for a part of the reason why we ended up doing this is because when it got nominated last month, so many people were more interested in this than the Trader Baru Cormorant that they started reading it and they were enjoying it so much that me and Will were like, screw it, let's read it. Let's do it as our mid-month book. And I am so glad that that happened because it has just been such an enjoyable read. It was a delight to watch people in our Discord legitimately enjoying it and engaging with it.
So very quickly, Kian says, I didn't read it and joined late. Based on what I heard, I'm guessing this is a dark retelling of Seabiscuit. No, but also yes, that would be very funny.
I've never seen Seabiscuit, but I don't know. But
it would be funny. It would be funny if it was.
It was so good.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We love you, our parasocial darlings.
Goodbye. Mwah.